Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today in this video we are going to learn about what is action potential, why is it necessary, and where does it occur. Okay, so because before learning all of this, what we should learn is why do we understand what is action potential, how does it occur, and what is the mechanism of this action potential. Okay, so why does it occur? The first thing which we should know is because of movement of ions across the cell membrane. So action potential is occurring in a cell, and why? Because of movement of ions across the cell membrane. Now, but you will ask me, why should we study action potential? Why should we beat our heads against the wall and understand this concept? It is pretty difficult if you are reading it for the first time, but over a period of time, if you keep reading it, it becomes a cakewalk. Okay, so why should you understand this in the first place? See, if you want to understand why does drug is working, okay, why do we give general anesthesia, or how is information transmitted from one place to another place in our body, or for that matter, why is even insulin getting released in our body? I mean, there is no single function in our body, I can tell you, which does not require this action potential. So this action potential is required everywhere in our body. So if you are an 11th class student, 12th class student, first MBBS, second MBBS, third MBBS, or fourth MBBS, you require this concept, you require to understand this concept. So let us focus on our today's class and understand what action potential is, where does it occur, how does it occur, and last but not the least, what are the functions, or why do we require this. Okay, so let us understand what action potential is. Now see, if you ask me what action potential is, I would say it is series of changes occurring in membrane potential of a cell. Series of changes occurring in membrane potential of a cell. Okay, so this is action potential. Now this might be very confusing, and let me make one thing very clear. Of a cell, when I say, I mean an excitable cell. I mean an excitable cell. Okay, and what is an excitable cell? Obvious question, what is an excitable cell? An excitable cell is any cell in our body which allows change in its membrane potential upon external or internal stimulus. So let's suppose you have a cell, and if you stimulate it from outside, or if let's suppose there is an internal stimulation from the nucleus of this cell, if it is able to change its membrane potential, the potential which exists across its membrane, then this cell can be called as an excitable cell. Okay, now, and this it can do, it is an excitable cell. So now let us come to what are the different excitable cells present in our body. The first excitable cell which we can find in our body is neuron, and let me tell you, it is very important. And second excitable cell which we can find in our body is muscle cell, otherwise known as muscle fiber. Okay, as you all know. Now you will ask, ma'am, what kind of muscle fiber? Skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, or cardiac muscle fiber? So now I want to ask you, do all these muscles contract? Yes, all these muscles contract. So all three of the muscle fibers, that is skeletal muscle fiber, smooth muscle fiber, and cardiac muscle fiber, all three of them are excitable cells. Okay, because if they were not able to change their membrane potential, then they will never be able to contract. Remember that thing. Okay, so the two most important excitable cells present in our body are neuronal cells and muscle cells. Now, before moving further, I want to tell you one thing. This neuron, okay, let me simplify this. Let's suppose this is the neuron. Okay, this is the neuron. I simplified it. Okay, my drawing is very bad, consider it like this only. So this is the neuron. Okay, now this neuron has a cell nucleus inside it. Okay, now this neuron at this point is not carrying any information. You might be knowing what is the function of neuron, carrying information from one place to another. At this point, this neuron is not carrying any information, it is at rest. So at this moment, the membrane potential which will be existing inside across the membrane of the neuronal cell is known as resting membrane potential. Okay, is known as resting membrane potential. Now, you will be asking me, ma'am, how much is the resting membrane potential of the neuron? So, a neuron, an average neuron in our human body has a resting membrane potential of minus 70 millivolts. Okay, now moving on, I am using and I am going to use membrane potential word across this lecture 100 times. So let us see what this membrane potential is. This membrane potential is nothing but a potential difference, और इन सिंपल टर्म्स इफ़ यू आस्क मी, यू नो, आप बोलोगे मैम इतना फिजिक्स हो गया हमें समझ नहीं आ रहा है. सो इफ़ यू आस्क मी इन सिंपल टर्म्स what is a potential difference, I would tell you voltage difference present across a cell membrane due to different movements of ions across the cell membrane. Okay, due to different movements of ions across the cell membrane. So because ions move across a cell membrane, because of which there is a potential difference or voltage difference created across that membrane, and this potential difference is nothing but a membrane potential. Okay, now moving on, you will ask, ma'am, how can ions move across a cell membrane? So see, this is the cell, okay, and this is cell membrane. Now on the cell membrane we have something called as ion channels. Okay, every cell membrane in human body, बचपन में पढ़ा होगा ना, fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane. उस in that fluid mosaic model आप लोगों ने क्या पढ़ा था? There are proteins in cell membrane. So there is a protein called integral protein or transmembrane protein in cell membrane. So those proteins are nothing but ion channels. Okay, so I'm not saying every transmembrane protein is an ion channel, but the transmembrane proteins present in cell membrane, they form ion channels and they allow movement of ions across the cell membrane. That is, whether ion wants to go inside the cell, it will use a transmembrane protein, or whether it wants to go outside the cell, it will use a transmembrane protein. Okay, so now I'm going to tell one important thing now. On all the cells in human body, especially excitable cells, but on all the cells in human body, we have something known as sodium potassium ATPase. What do we have? We have something known as sodium potassium ATPase or sodium potassium pump. In simpler terms, this is an ion channel or a transmembrane protein which allows movement of both sodium ions and potassium ions across this channel. Okay, so now see, this sodium potassium pump or sodium potassium ATPase, why this is called an ATPase, I will tell you. We'll come to that point. Okay, you have to wait. So this sodium potassium pump allows movement of two potassium ions inside the cell. This sodium potassium ATPase allows movement of 2 potassium ions inside the cell, and it allows movement of 3 sodium ions outside the cell. Now see, I'll depict it in this picture and you can see. See, this is pink color is representing cell membrane and this is your ion channel. Okay, so this ion channel is nothing but sodium potassium pump. This sodium potassium pump will allow movement of 2 potassium ions inside the cell and movement of 3 sodium ions outside the cell. Okay, so this is the work of this sodium potassium pump. Now I told you, I'll tell you why this is called in sodium potassium ATPase. This is called in sodium potassium ATPase because it requires ATP energy for allowing the movement of these ions. Okay, now why it is requiring energy for allowing the movement of these ions? That might be your primary question. Okay, so let us come to that. Why this is requiring energy? Because my friends, potassium is an intracellular ion and sodium is majorly an extracellular ion. Okay, potassium is an intracellular ion. What do I mean by that? I mean that potassium is majorly found in intracellular fluid. That means the concentration of potassium present inside the cell is more than present outside the cell, and sodium is an extracellular ion. Similarly, the concentration of sodium present outside the cell is more than the concentration of sodium present inside the cell. Okay, so if in a normal scenario in our human body, if we were to allow the free movement of potassium and sodium, let us see in another cell here. If in a normal circumstance we want to allow the movement of potassium and sodium freely across the membrane, what will happen? Now see, because potassium is more inside the cell when compared to outside, what will happen? Potassium will normally move from inside to outside, and because, now see, because sodium is more outside the cell when compared to inside, therefore normally sodium will move inside the cell, and this normal movement of potassium and sodium do not require energy because they are occurring across their concentration gradient. Okay, so it is moving from a region of low concentration to a region of high concentration naturally in the body, and that does not require energy. But here what is happening? What is this sodium potassium pump doing? It is moving the potassium inside the cell. Inside the cell already there is so much potassium, and you are putting in more potassium. You have to give it energy to digest that potassium, right? So because of that we are giving ATP in the form of energy, okay, so that this sodium potassium pump can work and force that potassium inside the cell where already there is so much potassium, and force that sodium outside the cell where already there is so much sodium. Okay, so that is why sodium potassium pump requires energy to work. This is a very simple thing I have told you. It's a very simplified concept. There's so much more to sodium potassium pump if I start explaining, but we do not have so much time in this lecture, so let us continue now further. So after explaining you what is sodium potassium pump, what is an excitable cell, what is action potential, what is membrane potential, let me come to stages of action potential. The first stage of action potential is phase of depolarization. Okay, so phase of depolarization. Now this is the most simplest thing which I come across in my life, and depolarization is the word which you will use everywhere you will see in physiology book, in pathology book, in medicine book. Okay, so the phase of depolarization. What do depolarization mean? Now see, I am going to tell you a very important thing. You have to concentrate here. This is the cell, okay, and this is the cell membrane. Normally this cell membrane is not conducting any information, and it is at rest, and it is having a resting membrane potential of minus 70 millivolts. So this is negative. Okay, now if let's suppose I give a stimulus to this cell, okay, and this let's suppose I give a stimulus to this cell. This stimulus, what does it do? It activates voltage gated sodium channel. Voltage gated sodium channels present on the membrane of this cell and allows movement of sodium ions inside the cell. Okay, are you getting me? What happens during a phase of depolarization is the neuron, let's suppose, is at rest and is having a membrane potential of minus 70 millivolts. Okay, now what happens is we have given a stimulus. This stimulus will cause the activation of voltage gated sodium channels present on the cell membrane of this excitable cell or neuron in our case, and this activation of voltage gated sodium channel present on the cell membrane will allow influx of sodium ions inside the cell. Now we are bringing positive charge inside the cell. Okay, listen to me very carefully. We are bringing positive charge inside the cell. So what will happen? What will happen? This resting membrane potential, which is minus 70, will change to a less negative value. Okay, or it will change to a positive value such as plus 30 millivolts. Okay, and this change of the membrane potential of the neuron from a negative value to a positive value is nothing but depolarization. Now why does depolarization occur? Depolarization is occurring because of movement of sodium ions from outside the cell to from extracellular fluid to intracellular fluid upon opening of voltage gated sodium channels. Now one very important point here, this stimulus which I told you, which allowed the opening of voltage gated sodium channels, is known as threshold stimulus. Okay, threshold stimulus. So what is threshold stimulus? In very simple terms, threshold stimulus is a stimulus required minimum amount of stimulus. Minimum is a very important term here, so I am stressing it. It is a minimum amount of stimulus required to open voltage gated sodium channels. Okay, do you understand? Threshold stimulus is minimum amount of stimulus required to open voltage gated sodium channels. Now a very little thing about this voltage gated sodium channel. This voltage gated sodium channel has an activation gate and an inactivation gate. So normally at rest, the inactivation gate of sodium channel, voltage gated sodium channel, is open. Okay, but when the threshold stimulus is applied and the voltage gated sodium channel is opening, both inactivation gate and activation gate are open, and when both inactivation gate and activation gate open, then this voltage gated sodium channel will allow movement of sodium ion. Okay, so this was a very small important topic. I thought it would be good thing to clear it out. So I hope the phase of depolarization is clear now to all of you guys. The second phase, okay, so okay, we'll come to the graph of action potential at the last. The second phase which occurs is phase of repolarization. Okay, repolarization. Now you will ask me, ma'am, what happens in this? Okay, so let me tell you what happens in this is, we have a cell and a cell membrane. Okay, and at this point we are not at the rest. Okay, at rest चला गया, पीछे ही छूट गया rest. अभी न्यूरॉन कहाँ पे था? phase of depolarization में था. So at the phase of in the phase of depolarization, what was the membrane potential? We had plus 30 millivolts. Okay, we had plus 30 millivolts as the membrane potential of the neuron at the end of phase of depolarization. Okay, so now what we have to do, now what happens is, as soon as the membrane potential reaches the plus 30 millivolts, there is opening of some channels known as voltage gated potassium channels. Okay, so there are voltage gated potassium channels also present on the cell, like that of voltage gated sodium channels, and these voltage gated potassium channels open when the membrane potential reaches for plus 30 millivolts. Okay, when they open, they allow efflux of potassium ion. What do they allow? They allow efflux of potassium ion means they cause removal of potassium ion or movement of potassium ion from inside of the cell to outside. Okay, now what you are doing? Let us see. In depolarization, you allowed sodium ions to move inside the cell, means you are moving positive charge inside the negatively charged cell. Now what you are allowing? You are allowing movement of positive charge outside the cell. So what will happen to the membrane potential? The membrane potential, which was already positive because of movement of positive charge inside the cell, will now again become negative. Why? Because you are removing the positive charge. Okay, I agree you added sodium and you are removing potassium, but because you are removing positive charge outside the cell, this plus 30 millivolts membrane potential will change again to minus 70 millivolts. Okay, and why does this occur? This is occurring because of movement of potassium ion outside the cell, and this is what is known as repolarization. So if you ask me, ma'am, can you summarize repolarization in one line? Yes, I can. Repolarization is nothing but change of membrane potential of an excitable cell, in our case neuron, change of membrane potential from a positive value to a negative value again. Okay, and this is nothing but repolarization. And what is that? In a case of neuron, it is plus 32 minus 70 millivolts again. Okay, so now you will ask, okay ma'am, everything is fine. What happened? We were at resting membrane potential of minus 70 millivolts. We went to plus 30 millivolts by allowing sodium to go inside the cell, and now we are coming back to minus 70 millivolts after allowing the potassium to go out of the cell. But this is not it. In human body, nothing is so simple. Everything is complicated. So what happens now? There is a third phase also. And this third phase is phase of hyperpolarization. So in phase of hyperpolarization, what happens is I'll tell you. Okay, what happens is, we have, let's suppose, a cell again. Okay, in this cell we have this potassium channel, voltage gated, which was open. Now this voltage gated potassium channel is stubborn, like you and me. It will not close. Okay, it will not close. We are telling, as soon as the membrane potential reached minus 70 millivolts, the cell's nucleus, me and you, all of us told the voltage gated potassium channel to close. Please close, and it won't listen to us because it is stubborn. So now it is open. Okay, and it is happily allowing movement of potassium ions outside the cell. Even after reaching minus 70 millivolts, this potassium channel is happily allowing movement of potassium ions outside the cell. Okay, so what will happen? Even after reaching minus 70 millivolts, you are still removing positive charge out of the cell. Means what will happen to your minus 70 millivolts? This minus 70 millivolts will convert to a still more negative value of minus 90 millivolts. And why is this happening? Because this stubborn voltage gated potassium channel is not closing on time. Okay, because this is not closing on time, that is why this minus 70 millivolts of membrane potential is reaching a more negative value of minus 90 millivolts, and this is nothing but your hyperpolarization. So now if you ask me, what is hyperpolarization, ma'am, can you summarize in a one line? Yes, I can, of course. Again, what is hyperpolarization? Your hyperpolarization is change in membrane potential from a negative value to a more negative value. Okay, so this is nothing but hyperpolarization. And what is that more negative value? It is minus 90 millivolts. So this three phases, phase of depolarization, phase of repolarization, and phase of hyperpolarization together constitute what is known as action potential. Now, can you go to the start of the lecture when I told you the definition for action potential? What was it? It is, I told you, the action potential is series of changes occurring in membrane potential of an excitable cell. Okay, so could you not see the series of changes occurring in membrane potential? Before the membrane potential at the start was very happy, minus 70, but now it got changed to plus 34, plus 30 in the phase of depolarization. Then it got changed to minus 70 again in the phase of depolarization. Okay, so it reached plus 30 millivolts. From plus 30 millivolts, now it got changed to minus 70 again, and from minus 70 it got changed to minus 90 again. So this is series, these are series of changes occurring in membrane potential. Okay, they're pretty obvious. That is why I told you action potential is nothing but series of changes occurring in membrane potential of an excitable cell. Okay, now one more thing, you might find a very different definition in your textbook, and if you are a first MBBS student and reading GKPAL, you will find a lot of more content in your textbook, but that is textbook for a reason, and I am me for a reason. Okay, so I just tried to simplify it and tell you in a very simple term. So this is nothing but an action potential. Now, very important graph which exists in every physiology textbook, and which is, I guess, very confusing to most of the people, most of the students, who are reading that for the first time. But believe me, it's very simple. It's the most simplest thing you'll come across in MBBS. Okay, so now let us plot that graph and clear all of your confusions. Okay, so let us start. First, here on x-axis, what do we have? We have time. On y-axis, what do we have? Membrane potential in millivolts. Okay, time in seconds. It is very important to label the x and y axis. Remember, your math teacher told you, and now I am telling you. Without labeling x and y axis, if you put up a graph, someone like me will never give you marks, if at all I was in a place to correct someone's paper. So yeah, coming now to this graph. Okay, so phase of depolarization, initially our membrane potential was minus 70 millivolts. Okay, this is our zero. This is 0 millivolts. Our membrane potential was minus 7. Let us consider this is minus 90 millivolts. This we will take minus 70. This is minus 90. Okay, and this is plus 30 here. So our membrane potential was minus 70 initially here. Then what did we do? We stimulated it and it went to plus 30. So this line is nothing but depolarization, representing depolarization. Now as soon as it reached plus 30, our cell remembered that the home is the best place. We should always be doing rest in that place. So what did it do? It immediately opened potassium channels and effluxed them out. So what happened? There is movement of this plus 30 millivolts membrane potential again to minus 70. And what is this? Repolarization. Okay, now at repolarization, the cell got bored. It thought, why again and again coming to minus 70 at rest? I am getting bored. What did it do? It kept open the potassium channels and potassium efflux continued. So what happened? The membrane potential reached minus 90 millivolts. So this is your repolarization, this is hyperpolarization, and this is depolarization. Okay. Depolarization. So this is the graph of action potential. I want to mark something here. This is the peak of action potential. Okay, this is the peak of action potential. So I guess everything is fine now. This is the graph of action potential, and this was the action potential topic. Now if you ask me, ma'am, so we learned what is action potential, we learned how does it happen, we learned mechanism, and if you ask me where does it occur, in excitable cells. And now if you ask me why is this required, so this is required for everything. Okay, action potential is required in neurons for transmission of information from one place to another place. Inside the cells, why is action potential required? Inside the muscles, it is required for contraction of muscle. Okay, so in simplified terms, if you ask me why is action potential required in excitable cells, so in neuron it is required for transmission of information, and in muscle cells it is required for contraction of muscle. Okay, so it is a very simple topic, very simple topic. I hope you enjoyed the video, and sorry for the disturbances which occurred in between, but I hope you enjoyed it. And if you understood even 1%, do like the video, subscribe to the channel, and bye. Press the bell icon.